Hello, and welcome to the Roanoke Presents From Print to Podcast. I'm Liz Long, your friendly neighborhood editor, and today's special bonus episode, I'm honored to be joined by Cyrus Pace, the Executive Director of the Jefferson Center. I've been a longtime Jefferson Center fan. Their programming is so phenomenal, but when I became a board member in late 2022, I learned there is so much more to the Jefferson Center than simply the world-class concerts. The Jefferson Center is not your typical entertainment venue. Formerly a high school, it has transformed into a vibrant hub for community engagement, education, and entertainment. From its innovative music education lab to its dynamic programming of shows and music events, Jefferson Center stands as a testament to the power of creativity and collaboration in fostering stronger, more connected communities. I'm so excited to share more thanks to Cyrus Pace. Cyrus, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. I wanted to share first how I came to know you through the Roanoker in our 40th anniversary. And so we did this a decade ago. This is you as a young man in our 40th anniversary issue, and you were almost new to the role, and it's been so incredible to see you kind of evolve both in your leadership and the strength of the Jefferson Center as a whole for our community.
Thank you for that. That is definitely a younger picture of me. No question about it.
Yeah, but so of course your role has just only increased in responsibility to the community. And so first I wanted to tell listeners what the Jefferson Center is for those who don't necessarily know what it is or only think about it as programming.
Sure. So we can go back to the very beginning, which is 1924 when it went online as a high school for Roanokers, right? Mm-hmm. So it was the high school for most people in Roanoke City through about 1972 or 73. And then it was shuttered, unfortunately, but then we got two new high schools, which was also great, William Fleming and Patrick Henry. And then it kind of fell into disrepair, and it took a group of alumni from Jefferson High School to get together and decide they wanted to save it and do something great with it. The initial stage of it was, again, just saving the building and putting tenant leasing in it. So nonprofit tenants having a space to do their work. The second stage is when they realized that there was this great hall in the middle of the building, and they could put, some money into that and built Chapman Performance Hall. This was a 900-seat venue. Then, of course, Fostech Hall, which is a 150-seat venue. And then the sort of third stage of our growth is where we have the Music Lab, which is our after-school music education program. And so in addition to sort of the history there of what we're doing in terms of programming, it's also a place where people have thousands of different kinds of events. Of the programming that you see at Jefferson Center, maybe 40 or 50 of those nights are ours, things that we program and produce. Of the majority of the things that happen in that building are outside partners like the symphony or the opera. We often bring them up, or Roanoke Ballet Theater, or even just a touring comedian whose promotions company wants them to do a performance at Jefferson Center. And so we do all of that. And we'd like to think of it as a community center, but I think the better term for it is really a performing arts center that also does all of this additional work in terms of rentals and leasing. I
mean, that's a lot. And obviously you can't share too much about next season because we're not quite there yet, but I'm already seeing emails, and we've talked about some of the exciting things that are going to be coming up. So maybe we'll give listeners a little preview taste of that towards the end of the episode.
Sure.
Yeah. And so in thinking about the Music Lab, let's talk about the Music Education Lab. This is such a great initiative that I really think more people should know about. So tell us about that. What was the purpose of it? Why did this whole thing come about?
Sure. So initially, it was the Downtown Music Lab, which was actually at a different location. And the decision was made by the board of directors of that organization, the board of directors at Jefferson Center, to bring the education program within Jefferson Center's foundation to be operable in its own 501c3. So think of it as a really well-resourced music studio. Where we also run education programs, right? So it's everything from the education program, of course, has grown since then as well. We've got students who are coming in and learning how to be engineers, and others who are coming to learn how to be songwriters, or they're interested in the music business. But
you might have the next Taylor Swift on your hands.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Probably do.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So we have had some folks that have gone on to national and international stardom from that program. But we also do things like go out to Weston Center and work with 4 or 5 elementary kids. Weekly on their beat making, right? Learning how to write songs and write beats and produce things. We work with the YMCA. We work with the Boys and Girls Club. We're out in the community too. And then, of course, you think about the artists that are coming to Jefferson Center and those who are willing to do a master class and work with students. It's also a neat thing, right?
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting parts about it. The fact that you have some of your performers who come in and that they're willing and able to sit down with a bunch of interested kids, essentially, who just want to learn or just be part of it and to see kind of what their experience is. That's something that you're not going to find anywhere else in the area.
Right. And we like to think of what we do there not as building musicianship, but building lifemanship. This idea that by talking to, Branford Marsalis or Derek Trucks or Chris Thiele or Susan Tedeschi, you're talking to people about why their career made sense, right? The realities of being a touring musician and the character development that comes from learning how to be good at something. We'd be just as happy if any of these students become editors at the Roanoke magazine or doctors or whatever they're teachers, whatever they decide to do. Music is just a framework for a conversation about living a quality life with a high degree of character. That's how we're thinking about it.
Yeah. And are there any specific maybe memories or experiences that you've been able to offer that kind of top of mind?
Yeah, I think Branford Marsalis would be one. His masterclass when we never know how it's going to go, particularly if we add on the masterclass on a contract. And sometimes the agencies or the management's okay with it, but the artist doesn't necessarily know this is happening.
Right, I'm doing what now?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going where to do what. And then the initial stages of it were, it seemed as if they could be a bit prickly. But then he instantly realized that these kids had been prepared to ask really good questions. They were interested in truth in his process and the music he writes and how he's toured with the Dead, the Grateful Dead, but also Sting and also jazz groups. And of course, coming from New Orleans and the most important family in jazz, really, the Marsalises. And it ended up being a really inspiring hour. Another one would be, Chris Thiele, who made the point that you have to be a master of something, right? It's about craftsmanship, that everyone should learn how to do something well because of what it teaches you about being a human, and it was nice to hear him say that. And of course, we're students like, well, that was really important. Of course, the teacher at the time said, I literally have been telling them that nonstop for the last 6 months, and then all of a sudden now Chris Thiele is saying it with his cute mandolin and all that. Then it's, it rings true. But those have been some neat moments. And of course, the Starkey Puppy Family Dinner Project that won a Grammy, and that whole project was engineered to support kids in the music lab, and some of the kids featured there, are having great careers. Judy Jackson, who sang on that, lives in London and has a European touring career, singing jazz and R&B, and I don't know. It's a neat program, and it's neat to have it within a performing arts center because, again, the connection between the artists and the students.
Right. And in thinking about, so it kind of segs into programming, which, again, there is so much more to the Jefferson Center than simply the programming. Right. But you have such a wide variety of genre and experience that viewers can enjoy. We go to almost all the jazz shows because that season is always fantastic. And it's always an experience, no matter who is showing up. Every jazz show is different in some unique way, whether they're singing, they're singing with a unique voice or they have a cool instrument. I mean, I'm seeing instruments I have never seen before on that stage. And then, of course, one of my favorite shows, which this is kind of self-serving, but you and your brother played last season, Thanksgiving weekend, I believe.
So fun.
And that was such a great show. And it was so amazing to, I knew you played, but I didn't know you played. That was cool.
Yeah, nice of you to say that.
Yeah.
That was the best gig I've had in a really long time.
I mean, what is it like to be able to play at your own venue?
Yeah, it was fun. In fact, I waited a long time to do it, right?
Yeah?
I've been there 14 years because you want to have the arts manager hat on and, of course, not create the perception that you're using the venue as an opportunity to, to give yourself more gigs.
Yeah. Headline yourself,
It's pretty easy, it turns out, to solve that. Just don't pay yourself. So I didn't.
Did your brother get paid?
Yeah, my brother did get paid.
Well, he flew from overseas, so that's fair.
And the drummer as well. Yeah, they got paid. But the diversity of what we present, I think, is really key. And you build a relationship to brand, as you do with the magazine, of course, too, right? Like, it's not as if you're telling everybody exactly what's going to be in every magazine. They say, well, that's a magazine I enjoy. I like the way it looks, the way it feels. I want to know what's happening in the community based on their perspective on it. It's the same thing. People come to shows for people they've never heard of. And what's interesting, which I'm sure is the case for you as well, is sometimes they're floored in a good way and sometimes they're floored in a bad way too, right?
Well, you can't please everybody. That's what I'm learning.
Yeah, I really didn't like that article, or I really did not prefer hearing.
We get that every once in a while.
Yeah, or It turns out I don't love the Hammond B3 organ, right? Or whatever.
Who knew?
Yeah, whatever it is. So people willing to take chances on things is probably the key to why an arts venue is a different kind of thing, right? It's pretty easy to figure out what's going to sell tickets. It's harder to build a relationship to a patron base where they're willing to take chances on you, and even equally importantly, willing to write a check of support and donation, right?
Right.
Say, I'm going to buy the series, but I also support you because I'm writing a check every year that supports your ability to continue to do this.
Well, and that's an important seg too, because we, as a board member, again, I have sort of inside knowledge that listeners might not know, but they need to know because there's a capital campaign happening because this building is 100 years old and we're celebrating that as well as trying to figure out how to protect and enrich this, entire venue.
Right. Yeah. We sort of have dual challenges right now. We're, like many businesses, trying to keep up with inflationary pressure. And even though we've done a pretty good job in the earned revenue environment, earned revenue being contrary to donated revenue, right, fundraising, the earned revenue environment has been pretty good. Tickets are being sold. People are using our spaces, but it's more expensive to do the business than it's ever been, predominantly because of inflation. And then on the building side, we've got, $5 or $6 million in deferred capital that will have to be taken care of. And of course, as you know, we're in a conversation with the city of Roanoke about what level of liability they are willing to incur, or they are already incurring just when they might practice acceptance about that. We're not sure how it's going to go at this point.
Yeah, at time of publishing this episode, we're still sort of in a pitch and see.
Yeah, exactly. We're wondering what that's going to look like. What I can say is, support donations make the thing work. Right. It doesn't continue that way on an annual basis. On a $2 million budget, just on the operational side, not including deferred capital, about $500,000 is raised. So 25% of the business model depends on donorship. So we appreciate people who support annually for campaigns or whatever it is. It's a big part of making sure the thing continues.
Well, and in thinking about that, because if somebody wants to ask, why should I be supporting this, not just as a venue or as a premier arts venue, but the integrity that the building has to the city itself. Let's talk about that, because this is something that it's important to Roanoke's history, whether we realize it or not. I realize that now after being on the board and understanding what a big piece that Jefferson Center plays.
Yeah, well, we like to say, it's about the identity of Roanoke, right? And of course, that's true for alumni who would have gone there. But it's become more and more true. People are proud of living in a community that has a historic theater that's doing the work that we're doing. We know that, whether it's Dr. Learman or Dr. Friedlander at FBRI and the med school, that they're recruiting people based on the fact that there are cultural amenities in this community. So it's about the kind of community you want to live in, right? What's our vision for how it is? What's our realities? What are our realities now, and what do we want it to be like in 5 to 10 years from now? It's interesting, right? If someone walks out and asks a taxpayer in the city of Roanoke or anywhere, says, "Do you think your dollars should underwrite, classical music or jazz? Do you think your tax dollars should pay for that?" And they'd be like, "No,
right, get out of here."
But hell no. But then if you say, do you think your tax dollars should support living in a culturally enriched and culturally community with cultural vitality, they would say, yeah, of course.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Then if you said, listen, do you think kids in the elementary schools here should have access to an opportunity to see, one jazz performer a year, or, 2 symphony events a year, or have an opportunity to go to a museum or a science museum, whatever it may be? The answer to that is going to be, of course, these kids should have that, right? So it really comes down to how you ask the question, and I think Jefferson Center has asked the question the right way for, almost 30 years now. 25 years of programming and 30 years as a foundation. Are we doing the right things for the community? Is it engaging the community? And are we finding a balance of earned and contributed revenue over time for it to continue to do its work?
Right. And in thinking about the collaborations, you've mentioned the symphony and other organizations that are able to be on our stage. And so let's talk about the collaboration, because this is something that we work with the community. You're constantly out in the community talking about the Jefferson Center, how people can be part of that, not just as individuals or attendees, but bringing your event or your business or your show to this space. And so in thinking about all these organizations. What are particularly fruitful collaborations that we've really been able to experience?
Yeah, so there's some that are engineered, and some just happen as a matter of the fact that we're a venue where people can benefit from the use of our space. So it's a pendulum or a spectrum, I guess is a better way to say it. Some of the more engineered ones, for example, when we worked with the Granite Theater Film Lab, our kids from the music lab wrote the music to pad the Granite Theater's video projects. That's a cool engineered.
I just found that out last week, and I thought that was so. It's genius because that goes hand in hand, right? Like that makes total sense. But then to be able to see these kids working together in all sorts of various ways to make it happen, like what a great experience.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah,
and a good example of how organizations can work together to make our community better.
Right.
And then sort of, I guess, natural collaboration or sort of things that just sort of happen innately is the fact, again, we're a venue. So if someone comes and does a performance at Schaffman Performance Hall, it's usually our production crew. It's our front of house, which is, your experience at the bar or parking, or it's our box office that's selling tickets to it. So collaboration is built into it. We know that those organizations do better as we do better, and I hope they feel the same way for us, which is, if Jefferson Center is stronger and has a model that makes sense over time, then we're going to still have a space to do our best work. If I'm under-resourcing competencies in any part of my team, that affects those organizations' ability to do their work competently too. It's not just a shell, right? Just walking in and they say, "Here it is.
Oh
Good luck to you."
Yeah.
Because first of all, safety.
Right.
You're thinking about a fly system in the theater with thousands of pounds of things lifted over people's heads.
Right.
But you're also just talking about competency in the lighting environment and the audio environment. You're talking about competency at managing a bar where you can figure out how to sell $8,000 or $9,000 worth of alcohol in 45 minutes. Right?
Wow. When you put it that way.
Yeah. It's competency in the box office, meaning that those people that are your first point of contact with your patrons know how to handle those conversations. And that's everything from a comedian show to a jazz concert to I don't know, whatever else you might sell tickets to, knowing how to handle each of those conversations well. And also keep in mind that each of those people are stakeholders in the success of Jefferson Center, even if it feels transactional, right? That they also might be donors at some point. So we think of everybody as an opportunity for building a relationship, and your box office is an important first step in doing that.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to your team and your staff, because it's every experience I have when I go there, everyone's happy to be there, and they're so kind, and they're patient. Obviously, that is like a key thing when dealing with public, right, front facing. Yeah. But breaking behind that kind of fourth wall, like give a shout out to your team. Like let's talk about Jamie Cheatwood, who's programming, who's going out there and finding the acts to bring people into your space. Aaron Kelderhouse is working your marketing and making sure that people know about it. I mean, you have a really fantastic team behind you, and the volunteers too.
Yeah, we are as strong as we've ever been in terms of a team, and that is an important thing, that you have continuity. Kind
of key, right?
Yeah, it's key.
Like you said, a well-oiled powerhouse.
Yeah, it's quality and also continuity, right? The idea that you would retrain, for example, your programming person annually, that would be impossible.
Yeah,
right?
Terrible.
And Jamie's done as good as anyone we've had in that position at understanding the market, understanding what works here, helping understand how to product a show. Does it sell 400 tickets? Does it sell 450 tickets?
I want to pick her brain to figure out like all of those steps, because it's like you said, it's not just a show. I just show up and I enjoy it, right? But behind the scenes, she has spent months putting this together and making it all come together. Like that's really critical.
Yeah, from the first thought, which is this is someone we think might make sense in this market, a performer that makes sense, to then discovery and the connection with the agency. In the end, it comes down to, is the date right? Are they doing a tour where they're going to come through here?
Right, that's key too.
Yeah,
Can the artist fit it in?
Right.
Yeah.
But then you got to figure out how much to pay that person.
Right.
The agent's going to be really clear on how much the artist should make. Yeah, and sometimes you have to just go with that, or you're not going to get the artist.
Right.
That would be true with an Emmylou Harris, for example. But others, there's some negotiating room, and knowing where to negotiate and where not to negotiate is important. And of course, the artists who are dying to play at your venue are the ones oftentimes don't make sense.
Yeah.
Right. You can ask them how much they're dying to play based on the fact that you can say, well, would you be willing to play for nothing?
Yeah, well,
how much are you dying?
That'll show.
Yeah, exactly. We don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that would be an approach. But it's a good team, and it's a good team with not a lot of redundancy too, is maybe what I mentioned. Each of these folks have to be experts in their part of what we do. We've tried to build redundancy over time, but again, it's every small business.
We have that conversation all the time.
Yeah.
It's not, you and I joke about getting hit by a bus, but now it's, if I won the lottery, that's a much more positive outlook on things.
Yeah.
But it is like, what happens if you win the lottery and move to your remote island? Like, what happens? Who takes that over?
Right. What you tell yourself as a leader, of course, is that you are building a framework for not only leadership development among others, but your job is to put yourself out of a job, It's
an interesting way of looking at it.
I think that's probably true at the executive director level. For those others who would also like to do that, it's harder because there isn't really redundancy, right? You've already got one production guy working 60 hours that week. It's difficult to ask him to also come in and learn how to sell tickets in the box office, Not that he or she couldn't, they could. Right. Clearly, anybody can figure these things out. It's just about the amount of time we have and the kind of resource that we have.
Right.
Can we stay at the current staffing levels despite the inflationary pressures that we have, and what does that reality look like, and where can we find? I think redundancy obviously gets challenged even more when it's harder and harder to retain people. It's also a difficult hiring market, as you know.
Right.
Keeping a good team in order right now is hard for every small business, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but luckily you've done a really great job with that. I mean, like I said, we don't go in there and not meet smiling faces and people who are glad to see other people there, and it feels like a small community within itself when you're at one of those shows.
Well, I appreciate that. It's mostly because I have absolutely no concern for where they are at any time.
Just let them do their thing, whatever.
Well, I mean, actually, it's kind of true. I often say that not this isn't a leadership podcast, but what I usually tell people is their autonomy and flexibility is directly tied to their accountability, right? If they're functioning in a way that shows they have immediate and full understanding about the level of accountability they have, and they're owning that accountability and they're getting things done, they have infinite flexibility.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want to start a leadership podcast with me? Because that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, that'd be fun too.
One interesting facet of Jefferson Center is its offerings of event rental and tenant spaces, which was something I didn't know until I joined up with you guys. And so I was thinking about how that contributes to the overall mission and what type of events or businesses you're finding in that space.
Yeah, sure. So the building is about 130,000 square feet. About 30,000 of that is tenant leasing space. And we're about 87% leased at this point. So there are spaces available if anybody's interested.
If anybody wants to rent a space.
Yeah. And, we've got different rates for nonprofits than we do for for-profits, but both are still, I think, pretty competitive. And it also puts you close to downtown Roanoke with free parking.
Walkability everywhere.
Walkability,
yeah.
It's pretty great. A lot of folks that work in the building that live in Old Southwest that just walk to work or love being so close to the Y, of course, right next to the Y, And then, we've got Fitzpatrick Hall and the Training Theater and Fostech Hall and the front atrium and a lot of spaces that we use for rental or short-term events, everything from, the classic way of saying this is weddings to bar mitzvahs to quinceañeras to whatever, you know. We've had all kinds of things in those spaces. And I think that's important for our community too, right?
Yes, for sure.
A space that you can afford to do, life's most important events.
And I think that harkens back to our conversation with the city in terms of what we're offering. It's not just about performances or just about events, but it's also you're providing space for new businesses to come move in or businesses that, need to be downtown or whatever. I mean, that's a contribution to itself.
It is. And we like the energy in the building too, and there's a lot of folks
bustling
and doing interesting work. And tenants get some benefits too. We often do, buy one, get one free tickets to shows, and tenants can, go to the box office and get those. So we try to create a community there too. I've been thinking about just opening the bar every day at 3:30.
Oh, wait a minute. Now the magazine needs a new office, I think.
Yeah, right. Should start doing that. That would create community in its own way, I think.
For sure. We've got all sorts of cool ideas that way.
Yeah. But the tenant leasing becomes also a big part of our budget, as you'd imagine. So again, in that $2 million annual budget, tenant leasing is about $400,000 of that revenue. Unfortunately, that in total doesn't keep up with the expense of operating the building. we pay around $12,000 a month in just utility expense for electricity, not to mention water and gas. So it's an expensive building to operate, but the tenant leasing is a big part of solving that.
Right. So this is a side note, and Cyrus is very modest, so I'm going to brag on him for a minute. But one of the things I really respect about you and your team is the transparency. Those numbers that you just shared, you don't have to share those things. I think it's important for listeners, readers, Jefferson Center attendees, and participants to understand exactly where you stand in terms of what it means to be a nonprofit, what it means for people to be donating and buying tickets and things like that, where that money goes to. So I, as a Roanoker, as a citizen of the community, appreciate the fact that I could ask you any question and you're going to be very straight about it and tell me, here's what we're doing and here's why we do it and here's what we need to kind of fix that gap,
Yeah, I appreciate that. Some of that, again, I will be modest in saying that some of it's built into the nonprofit sector, right? It's a philanthropic organization where under the tax code, we report, you can find our tax return online. People don't, but the other side of that is we want people to ask questions, right?
Right.
Not just board members, but anybody that has questions about why we operate, how we operate, what are the details of the finances. I think it's great. We think of that as buy-in.
Yeah, well, it does create a trust between people. They know that they can rely on you to provide them cold, hard facts, even when you don't necessarily love the number or whatever it is.
Right.
But, you're very matter of fact in sharing that this is what we're doing and this is what we have and here's where we want to go.
Yeah. And I think it is trust building too, but it also is a strategy maybe I've learned to apply that if people know they can ask you anything, sometimes they ask you less and can save you some time.
I see. It's all on.
That's terrible. But it is kind of true in a way, right? Like what people want to know is whether you're going to be honest about how it's going. And once they've determined that you do plan to be transparent and you're going to tell the truth and that there's nothing to hide and there really isn't anything to hide, then that trust gets built a lot quicker.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. And again, it's another way of that community engagement and education. And in thinking about balancing some of that, so let's go back to sort of your mission, the organization's mission as a whole, creating a cohesive and impactful experience for both participants and audience members. That's like a really fine balance. How do you define that balance?
Yeah, this is the hardest question.
Is it? Okay. Well,
yeah, which is fine.
I like to stump you, so that's what I'm doing.
Cohesive might be, a stretch for how we're thinking of it. I guess what it is we think of the brand. Again, this is a question specifically to the concerts we're doing, right? So we think of it as, is it something that is going to be of high quality? Is going to be artistically important and high quality? And then the second part is, can we afford it, right? and then the third part is, is it something that the community can afford? And it's sort of through that lens that we're doing it. And another question we ask is this something that wouldn't otherwise come to this community without us?
Right.
Some stuff that we book would, right? We do shows that sometimes also will be at the Civic Center or might also be at the Harvester before or in the future. Other things are things that clearly would not be happening in this market if we weren't presenting them. And I think that's probably true for other arts organizations that use our facility too. You're not going to see, an opera without Opera Roanoke presenting it.
Right.
We get a lot of touring ballet, but we get a lot of local ballet too, So it's about presenting things that wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to be seen here.
Right. It's interesting just to find that balance. And again, I credit Jamie for thinking that far ahead and thinking about things that fit this market, because there's so much more to it than I'd really love to see that concert. Can't Taylor Swift come perform on stage? There's so much more than just asking that question.
And really venue size is a key part of that, but it's also staying on the radar. You may have seen we got David Cross coming.
I got that email. Yes, I did. Very excited.
And so Jamie, of course, has some thoughts about that, right? He can be...
I saw the little asterisk at the bottom that was like, don't bring your kids to this one.
Exactly. The 18 and over show. Right. Please know that the subject matter could offend certain people. And you message that stuff. And then you ask yourself, what's the relationship to this comedian and our brand? But we go through again the questions. Is this something that the community would love to see? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah.
Do we believe in the comedy? Is it really well done? Is he someone that people are going to be excited to be around and really enjoy their evening? Yes. can we figure out how to price it in a way for the community that is accessible? And the answer to that was yes. So the deal structure makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. And so talking about a hub for community engagement, I'm not sure, do you have strategies that you employ to thinking about that community engagement and education? Does that go hand in hand?
Well, more so now. And again, that sort of depends on where we are financially, whether we have got the resources to expand that part of our work. But education is community outreach, right? I think the term we use oftentimes at board meetings is audience development or audience growth. It's an audience of any kind is community engagement. So anytime you get someone in your building taking advantage of any service you provide, that's engagement, right? What I think we could be doing more of, the education program does a good job of it, but I think what we could be doing a better job of is being out in the community engaging, right?
Which is wild because I feel like you're always out engaging. Like,
yeah, I think I am.
You need a twin. You need a clone.
I think I am, but it's because we're a venue.
Yeah.
We say, hey, congratulations, community. You get to see David Cross, and then people buy tickets and they come, right? And we're doing that again in the right spirit of wanting to present things that matter. But there's also something to say for sort of breaking down the boundaries of the building and getting out in the community and reaching people in different ways as well. And I think we could probably do more of that. I used to do a little series I'd like to go back to called, it was like Jazz is Dirty or something. I don't remember what it was called.
Jason will listen to that, yeah, in a heartbeat.
Yeah, we would have people come and the bar would be open. I would talk about what's similar about like Miley Cyrus and early jazz musicians, right? And it would just be kind of a creative and open venue for conversations about art. My daughter had her piano. She does a rock recital with her teacher, which is really fun. So they do a classical recital and a rock recital.
Cool.
She did American Idiot on the piano, which is funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but there were 16 performances, I think, and I think 6 of them were Taylor Swift songs. Which is fun. I don't really know her music that well, so I was like, good for me. I was like, those songs are all right.
I'm impressed that you have a daughter and you don't know her quite in and out of all her albums.
Yeah, my daughter, so we're listening to like Curtis Mayfield.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Yeah. So you have 2 kids.
Yeah.
And Jason has taught your son so far, and I'm going to get Cece later. Yeah. But I think it's so amazing from that perspective that you, with your background in music, like you're not just playing everyday pop radio for them. I'm sure they get that, but you're really helping to share with them like the cultivation of many types of genres, all sorts of different music.
Yeah, it's kind of a cliche, but we do listen to everything, whatever.
You were just telling me about that app about listening to music from all over the world in any era. Like, it's wild. Radio, yeah.
But I'm more interested in supporting whatever they end up being interested in, And
I love that they're both musicians, and not necessarily because you are, but because they enjoy it, because they see its importance in the community and arts and culture, and
I think that's
how it enhances their own lives.
I think that's right. I mean, the piano thing, they all were asked to do 6 years of piano. Lewis did, and he's just doing trumpet now.
Yeah.
And Cece still plays piano, drums and bass. And again, for me, the music part of it is just a way to learn about things. She had to learn a song well enough to play it with musicians. She had one rehearsal with, and get up in front of a group of people she doesn't know and play the piano.
There are full-grown adults who are not going to do any of that.
And we got there to the recital, realized that she had been put first. So she was, she had to create the energy for the whole rest of the evening, create the vibe. Did a great job. So learning how to do that, I think, is the key to any sort of music endeavor, any endeavor. Again, you're learning the same thing as a high school basketball player. There's 500 people in the audience hoping your team wins.
Right.
How do you interact? The stuff that your husband's doing in terms of the wrestling coach is the same thing. The History Bowl, is that what it's called?
Yeah, the 4-peat now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. But you're right. I mean, you're right. Those things are not just about the one expert skill. It's about all the growth that comes around it.
Yeah.
So.
And listen, at the age group that your husband works with in middle school, it's all about character development.
My favorite reaction is, what grade does he teach? And I say 7th, and inevitably 100% of the response is, oh, bless his heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I digress. Yeah. And so in thinking about success stories, transformative moments over the years for Jefferson Center, back to our topic at hand, is there any particular moment or a couple of moments that stand out to you thinking about the organization, how we impact the community as a whole?
Sure. So probably October 1st, 2010, when they hired me.
Well, that's a pretty good one, I think. Yeah.
because earlier you said I was modest, so I thought that would be funny.
Obviously, we're gonna,
I mean, gosh, specific moments. I think, as I mentioned before, when we won the first Grammy, that's ever been produced locally, from our understanding, it's pretty neat. This isn't sort of an upbeat one, but figuring out how to survive through the pandemic.
I think that's an absolutely important one. As an entertainment venue, as an arts performance space, like that was a tough, we're still recovering from it, you know?
That's correct. And we find that ticket buyers still, some still ask us questions about, distance between spaces.
That's interesting. 4 years later.
Yeah. I guess, we've had the benefit of having good boards, in my tenure there, and before too, I'm sure, but I know the ones since I've been there. So those are important moments of when leadership transitions and you've got a new chair, a new executive committee, and you think about what that group can do to create forward momentum for the organization. I'd also mention the campaigns that we've had. I appreciate you mentioned the one we're currently doing, but those campaigns that we've had where, we've been able to generate some short-term resources that wouldn't have been there without those campaign initiatives have really been a saving grace. And for us, it, of course, helps us build relationships too, get to know people. It's maybe shouldn't have been a surprise, but it has been a surprise for me that I really like the fundraising part of the work. I like talking with people about what matters to them and what's important to them. And you learn very quickly, of course, as you do in anything, any sort of sales environment, right? That, that a no isn't a personal attack.
Right.
It just means that the timing isn't right, or the gift amount maybe wasn't exactly right, or what you do for the community is not what this particular person invests in. And you work that out and you figure those things out. But when you do find someone for whom your work aligns, it's a really, really fun and beautiful way to have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's spoken like a true executive director of the Jefferson Center. So
thank you.
I look forward to our leadership podcast.
Yeah.
So finally, the last question in terms of the Jefferson Center, thinking about the future, because, I'm not sure how much you can share with me about the next season without you give me a couple tidbits. Yeah. I don't know if anybody picked up on that one person you mentioned that, am I allowed to
We could just go with that.
Okay. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Emmylou Harris.
Yeah, that'll be great.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's
when
going to be
does
great.
this air?
I don't know, like next week?
Okay. Yeah, there's a chance that we might have gotten a booking with Emmylou Harris, but we're not sure yet.
Okay, got it. Yep.
Yeah. Which would be amazing if it does work out.
Yeah.
And there's others that we're working on that I think will be exciting. And it's a full season. And the interesting thing is we're booking these, of course, all the way through late winter and spring.
Right.
They get announced in early July. And, we're hoping that it creates a critical mass of excitement among our subscriber base, but more and more, it's also important, of course, that other people want to come out to these shows.
Right.
And there's some pinnacle acts there that I think people will be very excited about.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear more. I mean, I'm a board member and I don't even know. So that's how secretive it is until July.
Yeah.
So, but in thinking about other projects, initiatives, maybe you're excited about, I mean, how do we provide moving forward for our mission or impact? I mean, Jefferson Center has been here for a long time and it will be here for a long time. What are we looking forward to?
Yeah, well, primarily for me is I think my legacy will be whether or not I'm able to create a truly sustainable structure for the organization where the city has some level of liability for capital infrastructure. Because the only other solution is building an endowment, probably $8-10 million in an endowment, which I'm not sure we'd have the time to do based on the level of deferred capital needs. So I'm very hopeful about those conversations with the city, and I know we live in a community where people value what we do, and it's just really important that the city council is hearing from people about the value that they place in what we do, because it'll be up to the council to make a determination about what that structure might look like going forward. So it doesn't feel visionary maybe on some level, but for me it's probably the ultimate vision, which is we get to continue the work we do. We do it without being consistently concerned about capital infrastructure failure when people are coming to enjoy things like an Emmylou Harris or whoever it might be.
Yeah. Any other parting words before we leave?
No, just thanks for doing this. These are really good questions.
Oh, well, you're so welcome. That's me being modest. Yeah. And again, speaking as a board member, thank you for bringing me into it. It makes me feel like a bigger part of the community. It makes me feel like I have an impact with the other people who sit there with me when we meet. And that's really important. And of course, thank you to the patrons and the staff and the team who are providing all this hard work, and to you for leading that vision.
Well, thank you. And I do want to mention that, being a board member, having the opportunity to do that and knowing the importance of that, particularly, for those in their 20s and 30s or early 40s.
Early 40s.
Yeah, or whatever. It's a really important part of building a community. Board service is a noble act of philanthropy in itself, right? Because
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, and it's important because then you'll be able to pass that on if what other boards you might be on in the future. Hopefully, we're creating a model where you can say, hey, I saw the Jefferson Center do this, or this is a way we might approach this that might work better for this board. Functional boards are the only way to ensure that nonprofits are functional.
Yeah, that's key. Well, Cyrus, thank you so much for being on our very special bonus podcast episode all about the Jefferson Center today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, that was Cyrus Pace, the visionary Executive Director of the Jefferson Center. From its roots as a high school to its current role as a dynamic community hub, Jefferson Center continues to amaze with its innovative initiatives and vibrant programming. If you're feeling inspired and want to experience the magic of Jefferson Center all for yourself, become a board member, learn about music, an events planner, seeking a space, or you're simply curious about making a difference, there is something for everyone at Jefferson Center. To learn more about upcoming events, programs, and ways to get involved, you can head on over to their website at jeffcenter.org. Thanks to our readers and listeners for tuning into this special bonus episode, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We've got plenty more inspiring stories and conversations coming your way from every issue as we celebrate our 50th anniversary and so much more over at theroanoker.com.